Hello, everyone. I finished it before I started, but it's besides the point. Actually, today I wanted to talk about what I'm writing about and a realization I came to have. And I'm just gonna say it right now and try to articulate it. And I believe that the two beliefs that send people over the edge into killing themselves are the deciding factors, the X factor after all the depression and anxiety and the external stimuli and all that. The two deciding factors that push people over the edge, I believe, are one is the crisis of identity. That's what I'll call it. And two, it's that they feel like their pain is unbearable. So the first one is the identity crisis, and there's a couple of examples of this. So I think the easiest example you can uh, point to is Olympic uh, athletes. So what do I mean by this? So Olympic athletes, most of them uh, train a good chunk of their life to be in the Olympics, and this is their whole life. So their identity consists of being an Olympic runner. It's being an Olympic swimmer. It's Olympic powerlifter. So think of someone like Michael Phelps. He is an Olympic swimmer. That's who he is. That is what he is. But what happens when you take that away? That's what happened to Michael Phelps after the Olympics, is that he talks about how he can win all these medals, but at the end of the day, he didn't even think himself as a human being if he wasn't an Olympic swimmer. So he's constructed this identity through his actions and his motives and what he did every single day and his ambitions. He created this identity of an Olympic swimmer. And that pretty much took over his whole identity. And whenever that was taken away, what do you have? You have emptiness. Your identity is nothing. You are no one. And that's when people have these identity crises. That's when Michael Phelps goes into deep depression and starts drinking himself in a stupor. And that's when most, at least Olympic athletes, start to contemplate suicide after or the depression, after the descent into maybe drugs or alcohol, is because at the core they don't know who they are anymore. They have no identity. Are in a state where they don't feel real. A good quote I found was by Anna Lemke in her book Dopamine Nation. She says that if we don't feel real, ending our lives is inconsequential. And it is, because you're different than any fictional character that you can just write off because you don't feel like you have an identity. You don't feel like your ego is satisfied. So what's the point? Might as well just end it here. So instead of finding external stimuli to replace it, which they do with alcohol, with other pleasurable activities, with trying to find sex, love outside of yourself, when those things don't work, you're faced with yourself. You're faced with this identity crisis. And either you say, you know what? I'm going to start thinking of myself as something other than an Olympic swimmer. as in I do actions to reinforce a different identity, or understand that I don't have an identity. I have multiple identities, and it's good to diversify my identity and then start doing that by participating in multiple different activities, and is creating the habits and then integrating that into your subconscious. You do that, or you say, you know what, the pain's too much, and then you end it. And that's a good segue into the second and reason, or maybe the integrated reason of why I at the end people kill themselves is, or main reasons I think, is because they feel like their pain is unbearable. Whenever you are in these depressions, they are okay. So you have two type of depressions. One is what I'll call sadness and critical sadness, which is happenstance. So this is things that are happening in your external environment that produces a sadness within you that had that you could change with your external environment, with either your response to that external environment, or situating yourself in a different environment. Um, One example is, so the response to your what is happening to you is all in your control. And that's a good example is Viktor E. Frankl when he's going through the Holocaust. That's what he realizes, is that he has complete a freedom over how he chooses to respond in your given circumstances. And that's how you can and kind of not mitigate, but regulate that sadness, is understanding where it comes from and then choosing a different attitude. Or it's your, I say external stimulus, but it's more of biological mechanisms. For example, uh, when you don't have a lot of sunlight, that screws up with your biology. And that's what you see in Alaska and Greenland, is the suicides are so high because for half of the year they don't see the sun, so their circadian rhythms all screwed up. And there's a bunch of science behind why, and that can be detrimental to your mental health, um, and your brain, with actual biological consequences. uh, But that's in very rare circumstances. And like the only one I really can think of is the sunlight. And the other ones seem more hard to be a response to your environment. So that's sadness, and critical sadness, which is that biological component. What depression is, and that at least Jim Carrey talks about and distinguishes, is that it's your body saying, I don't like this character or actor you're trying to play, and I'm going to shut down, and I don't want to be him anymore. Screw you. So it's your body's way of telling you that you need to change. And that's so powerful because it goes back to identity crisis, why we get depressed and why we might get anxious, or mainly depression. Why we get depressed in a lot of situations is your body is thinking it needs to be something other than it actually is. And what's nice about meditation, and this is Zazen meditation, where you just sit down for about 20 to 30 minutes every day and close your eyes and don't do anything, is it clears out the need to be anything else. It forces you to sit down and just be within the present moment. In the present moment, there is no identity. There is only the responses you give. There is only the unconscious thoughts that go through your mind that you think are in your control but aren't. There's external stimulus. There's thoughts that provoke emotion in you. So you realize that your ego, or what you think, and your whole body is what Alan Watts talks about is just your body is an encapsulation of this person inside you is not really true. It's more of an organism that's working together. And that's the multiple identities within yourself. Oh, I dropped something. But that's what that deep rest is in depression. And so your body starts to shut down. And that's what happened with me. My body just started shutting down because my identity as a writer, even though I didn't tell myself I'm a writer rather than a son or father, or son or brother or friend, my actions led me into creating that identity for myself unconsciously. And whenever that went, I was in the same situation as the Olympic runner or swimmer or Michael Phelps. I didn't have an identity anymore. And that sent me in a spiral of depression and anxiety because I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know who I was or where I was going or what I needed to do. And I thought I just needed to write again to retain my identity. But what I realized is I needed to let go of identity and realize that I am pretty much part of this environment, of the universe, and I am a different quote unquote identity with everyone I talk to. How I talk to one person is going to be different than I talk to another person. And once you realize that, you start to form your identity as a human being, a human that lives within this environment, that is part of human society and is interconnected with everything else. That it's not just you, it's you, the person next to you, the house you're living in, the relationships you cultivate, the animals you encounter, or it's your interaction with life as well. And once you start separating your identities, like I'm an author, I am a father, I am a son. When you start seeing yourself as I'm a human being who has a brother, I'm a human being who has a father, I'm a human being who writes, you start to realize that these things can go, which it would be horrible for them to go, but if they do happen, it's okay. You're still a human being. But when people get into these depressions and to these anxieties, they might not have the tools at their disposal, the knowledge at their disposal, or they might not have people in their lives to unconditionally love them. So you get to a point where they're so anxious and so depressed, they're probably dousing themselves in addictions, where they feel so worthless and the pain is so intense that they feel like it's unbearable. And once they get to a point where they fully accepted that it's unbearable, they don't think they can bear it anymore. They don't think their life is worth living anymore. And they finally break through the body's natural inclination to live and kill themselves. It's unfortunate because one piece of evidence that really at least opened my eyes to it, and it might not be the best, but I thought it was pretty neat, is Seneca's words. So he was a ancient Stoic philosopher, and he talked about how if pain was unbearable, you wouldn't be living. And you think about that, you're like, oh wow, like, you're right. If my pain that I'm feeling right now was unbearable, that I couldn't handle it, then my body would die, my brain would die, my heart would get up, and then I wouldn't be here anymore. But it's just my consciousness thinking that it's unbearable. But my body's still here, my brain still works, my heart's still beating. So it's bearable for my body. Why am I convincing myself it's unbearable for me? Maybe because it's also something I don't want to deal with anymore. So maybe I use it as an excuse that the pain is unbearable just because I don't want to deal with it anymore. That's a good possibility as well. So like a deflection mechanism to making sure you don't feel this pain anymore. One thing I would say to that is pain is a necessary component for the human experience because it's a powerful indicator on what we should do with our lives. For example, I use a hand on a stove. Whenever you put your hand on the stove and you feel pain, you let go of it. And then, of course, you feel pain. And then it tells your brain, hey, like, don't freaking do it again. If you didn't feel pain on the stove and your hand and just burned, then you would lose your hand. But since your nerves are working together and want to preserve this body, they feel pain to tell you, stop doing that. It's the same with depression and anxiety. Specifically depression. Depression is, like what we defined before, is I'm sending pain your way to let you know that you gotta stop this shit. You gotta stop pretending to be something else. You gotta just sit down and listen to me and stop neglecting me. I'm talking about body and brain. Stop neglecting us. Or I'm going to send so much pain your way that you're going to have to be forced to do it. And that's what happened to me. I got into these states where right whenever I hit the floor, went to sleep. I was deep rest. And it was my body telling me, hey, like, you just need to stop what you're doing and look inside yourself. Listen to us and just accept what's happening. And then go from there. You don't need to be looking at external stimuli. You don't need to be chasing. And we're not going to give you energy because you need to pay attention to us. And that's what you need to do. Pay attention to yourself. I suggest doing these meditative actions, reflecting in your journal. You might not even have energy for that. I didn't. And if you don't have that energy for that, then it's telling you, okay, you need to start from bottom. As in, meditate. Literally just close your eyes and do nothing. Just sit there. If you have enough energy, go walk every day and just allow your brain to think and go through the motions and to sift through these anxious and depression as of thoughts, accept them as they are, instead of being so venomous to them. I know an instance with me, I took a long walk and I was pissed off that the walk wasn't getting rid of my anxiety and depression, which that's not the point of walking. Walking is just to let go. If I'm expecting it to do something else than that, then it's not meditative. Same with Zazen meditation when you're just sitting down. If you're doing this to get out of your depression, anxiety, you're only going to get more pissed off, because at the very first time, it's not going to do it for you, or the second time, or the third, or the fourth. But if you do this week after week after week, and you kind of just let go and do it, then you start getting to a sense where these depressive and anxious thoughts don't go away, but they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And they are going into normal voice. And even sometimes, if you do it long enough and you work at it, they get small. So small that you hear it, but you just go through it. Kind of like whenever these anxious and depressive thoughts are so loud and your voice of courage is so small, you just blow through the courage. But now it's opposite if you work on it throughout it. So that's the two reasons why I think ultimately people step over the line into suicide and deciding to commit suicide, is because they are lacking identity crisis, and they get to a point where they feel like their pain is unbearable. And these aren't conscious things. These aren't things like the identity crisis isn't a conscious thing, and you don't say, "Oh, I don't have an identity now, I'm going to kill myself." No, it's all unconscious. It's underneath. The pain ain't the unbearable pain. Yeah, you can say it's unbearable, but it's not that consciousness that sends people over. It's the unconscious, is depression, pressure, anxiety, that is pressed into your brain or pressed from external stimuli that is convincing you that you need to end it. And that's what I'm trying to talk through in my book, is letting people know that these two components are beliefs you have about yourself. You think they're real because you've given so much evidence to it. You've believed it so many times throughout maybe your life, or the last couple months when you have had the depression. You keep adding on to it, so that unconsciously you start believing in this. But what you need to do is start taking actions to believe in something else. If you want to be more grateful, you have to force yourself to say something you're grateful for every single day. You have to make it a habit and an action. And the habit and the action is what produces the thoughts. And what produces the thoughts is what shapes your unconscious after repeated and constant a habitual action. And that's the same with identity crisis. That's the same with unbearable pain. If you keep telling yourself that it's unbearable, I can't take it, I can't take it, I can't take it, I can't take it, then you're not. You're not going to take it. And you're probably going to send yourself into suicide. But if you keep saying, I know I'm feeling a lot of pain right now, but I'm going to get through this by doing X, Y, and Z. And then you keep telling yourself that, and you say, hey, you know what, this didn't work, but I'm going to get through this. 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 I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Tell yourself, I'm a human being and this is part of the human experience. This is part of the human experience. I'm a human being who is experiencing depression and anxiety. I'm a human being. I'm a human being. I'm a human being. If you look in yourself in the mirror and you tell yourself of one thing, compliment yourself every single day in the mirror saying, wow, I know I might not be the person I want to be, but you have really beautiful eyes. Wow. I really like when you smile. Wow. I am appreciative of my height. I'm appreciative that I get to look at myself in the mirror. I'm appreciative of this. And you keep complimenting yourself. It might not be true in the reality sense, but you convince your mind into these habits that formulate your unconscious mind into believing these as true. And I think that's how a lot of people can get out of depression and anxiety and these possible suicidal thoughts is the incremental. It's doing the habit of saying one thing you're grateful for and knowing that it's such a small task that you have no reason not to do it. So yeah, I'm hitting 28 minutes. So I'm gonna go to bed. I hope this helped. Something I'm really thinking about. And hopefully I can, I don't have a timetable on the book, but I'm enjoying going through it and trying to understand more. So stay tuned, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.